Okay, so we are back with the color course, and yes, today will be the second live out of the 7 that altogether consist the color course. Okay, so today we're going to look into what page number 3 of the PDF file is talking about. Okay, so page number 2 was talking about the fact that in Korean, there are some colors that can't be both nouns and adjectives, they can only be nouns. Okay, so today we will talk about, well, colors that can be both nouns and adjectives. Okay, but before we start in earnest, let's just briefly go through what we have talked about yesterday in the first live and summarize. Okay, so what did we talk about in the first lesson? Yes, we talked about situations in which we are using a color that can only be a noun. Okay, so if that's the case, well, you could have asked a very fundamental and technical question, right? Which is, then how about when I want to use a color as an adjective, as an attributive adjective and a predicative adjective? What is an attributive adjective? An adjective that you place in front of a noun. Well, what is a predicative adjective? An adjective that you don't place in front of some kind of a noun that it modifies. Okay, so of course there are more details, but to, yes, put it very simple, those are the two types of adjectives, right? So then, does it mean that you cannot do something like this? You cannot say something along the lines of purple shoes or the shoes are purple if you are using a color that can only be a noun? Of course, the answer is you can. Okay, so the first lesson was all about, well, finding alternatives, right? Yes, when you are using a color that can only be a noun, it can only be a noun. So we try to figure out other ways, alternatives, to say something like purple shoes without using that color as an attributive adjective. And yes, we found that alternative. We can use of. So what does of do? Of stays in between two nouns to indicate relationship between those two nouns. Okay, so if that's the case, well, purple is a color that can only be a noun. So I can say shoes of the color purple instead of saying purple shoes. Okay, so for example, if someone says, well, I bought purple shoes, they can say, I bought shoes of the color purple. So even if purple can only be a noun, yes, you can find another way to say something along the lines of basically the same thing, purple shoes, by placing of. Okay, then you could ask, what about predicative adjectives? What if I want to say something like, the shoes are purple? Well, yes, we also found an alternative for that, right? Which is to use it as a noun, a subject complement to be more specific, and placing an ending mark behind it. So for example, what do I mean by subject complement plus ending mark? If I can't say the shoes are purple because I can't use purple as a predicative adjective, well then I can just say a subject is a subject complement. What does that mean? A noun is a noun. Whenever you have a sentence that is saying a noun is a noun, this is a marker. I am a singer. Whenever you're saying noun is a noun, well, then this would be the subject and this would be the subject complement. So if I want to say the shoes are purple, I can just still keep the color purple as a noun and just say a noun is a noun. The shoes are the color purple. Okay, so I'm going to say 신발, shoes. And then I am not, of course, going to take into consideration is, and, was, were, are. And I'm just going to keep it as a noun, the color purple, 보라색. And then, yes, now we have the subject and subject complement. However, in Korean, a Korean sentence can never ever end with a subject complement, right? You have to, therefore, place something behind it, attach something behind it, something that we call an ending mark. Yes, in this case, the ending mark would look like 이에요, right? So that's what I mean by subject complement and ending mark. So even though you cannot say something like the shoes are purple because purple cannot be a predicative adjective, yes, we found an alternative. Subject complement plus ending mark. So in order to summarize, yes, if you want to say something along the lines of purple shoes, in other words, use a color as an attributive adjective, but when that color is a color that can only be a noun, the alternative would be of. Okay, and if you're trying to use it as a predicative adjective, well, then the alternative would be using it as a subject complement and therefore giving it an ending mark. Okay, does that make sense? If it does, 계속할까요? Should we continue? Okay, so that was a little bit of a preface, a little bit of a summary of what we did in the first lesson. Okay, so today, well, if there are colors that can only be nouns, well then, of course, this time what we're going to do is we're going to take a look into colors that can be nouns, but also adjectives. Okay, just like in English. So if you say, hey, all of you colors listen up. Can any of you be nouns and adjectives? Well then, the colors that will raise their hands would be colors like, yes, red, blue, yellow, black, and white. They will raise their hands and they will say, well, we can be adjectives. Okay, good. Then today we're going to look at these colors that can be both nouns and adjectives. Okay, so well, if that's the case, of course the answer is simple. If a color can be a noun and also an adjective, well, it means that, yes, you can go both routes. Are you going to take the alternative route and use of or a subject complement plus ending mark? Or are you just going to use it as an adjective and therefore inflect, conjugate them? So let's take a look into a couple of examples to further elaborate. Okay, so let's say I am trying to find some kind of a building, let's say, a small building. And my friend is waiting for me, my 친구 is waiting for me at the building. So I'm gonna call him and say, I think yeah, almost there, but which building exactly should I go into? They all kind of look similar. And my friend will say, well, there's a building that has a red door. Okay, so, sorry. My friend can say the door, or a house, doesn't have to be a building, the door is red. Okay, so in this case, I am using a color red that can be an adjective and also be a noun. So if I were using a color that can only be a noun, yes, I couldn't have said something like this. I had to say the door is the color red. So therefore, I should have said the subject door and the subject complement the color red and then give it an ending mark. So I could have said 문, the subject, and of course no articles, no us and thus, and do not take into consideration is, am, was, were, are, and then instead of saying red as a predicative adjective, I would have said the noun, the color red, which is 빨간색. Okay, so once again, if you see 색, the syllable 색 at the end of a color, it is not an adjective, it is being used as a noun, the color red. So if I'm saying a noun is a noun, the door is the color red, well then it means that I'm looking at door as the subject and the color red as a subject complement. So once again, a Korean sentence can never end with a subject complement, so therefore I should give it an ending mark. 이에요. Ending mark. Okay, so if my friend is going to say, oh, you're struggling to find the house? Well, look for a house that has a red door. The door is red. Then I can say 문 빨간색이에요. However, this is not the only way I can do it, because red happens to be a color that can also be an adjective. Well then, yes, just use it as an adjective. And inflect it then. In other words, conjugate it then. So this time we're going to use it as a predicative adjective. So if you're using an adjective, it means that there is a display form, right? 빨갛다. Okay, a form that ends with 다. But I don't want its display form, do I? Why? Because a display form means nothing, therefore it does nothing. Okay, so I want an actual form that actually has a grammatical function or attribute. Okay, so I want the actual form present tense ending. So let's go to inflection route number 1 to go get the yo ending. Okay, so what are the rules of inflection route number 1? Now, we have the H situation. And when you have the H situation, you once again have to divide the situation into two, right? When you have verbs and when you have adjectives. Right now, I have a display form of an adjective that ends with H once ta is removed. Okay, we have a perfect example in 빨갛다, right? A perfect example. Because, yes, I have a display form of an adjective that ends with H once ta is removed. So in this case, we will apply a 4-step formula, right? Remove ta, remove the H, change the vowel that came right before H into an E or ye, right? And number 4, now you can attach the ending to deal, finally. Okay, so right now, because I just simply want the actual form in present tense, I need the yo ending, which belongs to inflection route number 1. So that's what I'm going to do. I removed ta, I'm going to remove the H, and then now I have to change this vowel a into an e or ye. So how do I know which one it should be? Yes, take a look at the vowel that came right before the H, it's a, right? If this vowel is ya, then change the vowel into ye. If it's anything other than ya, then change it into e. Okay, so right now it's not ya, so I will change it into e. So 빨개, and then 드디어 I can attach the ending 빨개요. So now I have the actual form present tense of red, which is red. So now I can actually use it. So once again, if the vowel is ya, then change it into ye. If it's anything other than ya, change it into e. Okay, so 빨개요, 빨개요. Okay. So because red is a color that can be both a noun and an adjective, yes, I can say 문 빨간색이에요. The door is the color red. Or I can say the door is red. 문 빨개요. And now I'm using it as a predicative adjective. Okay, does that make sense? If it does, 계속할까요? Should we continue? So 문 빨간색이에요 or 문 빨개요. You can do both. Okay, now, of course, well, a lot of you who have been attending these lessons for a long time could ask the most fundamental question there is when it comes to this curriculum. Is it poetic or not? So with any of them, well, you showed me 2 ways I can do it. Is one of them poetic? Well, it's not. So you can literally just choose which one you feel more comfortable in and go that route. Okay, but now let's further elaborate, because I just said it can be a noun, it can be an adjective. Well, if it can be an adjective, it means that it should be able to be used as a predicative adjective but also an attributive adjective, of course. Okay, so let's say my 친구 is trying to help me find this 집, this house. So he told me, well, look for a 집 that has a red door. So the door is red. 문 빨간색이에요 or 문 빨개요. But let's say, so he gave me about 15 minutes to find it. I still can't find it. So my 친구 calls me again and says, or let's say I call my 친구 and I'm going to say, hey, I really need some extra help because I couldn't find, a red door. Okay, so because I can use it as a predicative adjective, I should be also able to use it as an attributive adjective. So what is an attributive adjective? Once again, an adjective that is placed in front of the noun that it modifies, red door. Okay, so in this case, that's not the case. That's why I'm looking at it as a predicative adjective. In this case, an attributive adjective. Okay, so how are we going to do this? Yes, once again, no I. It's too obvious. Of course, I'm looking for the door. And in poetic Korean, there is something that is the exact equivalent of couldn't, right? But in spoken Korean, no, we're just going to say can't. So therefore, if I change couldn't into can't, there is one technical issue, right? Now, nothing indicates past tense then. So the verb will do it itself. So it's not going to be couldn't find, it's going to be can't found. And of course, no articles. So I'm using it as an attributive adjective. Now, when you're placing an attributive adjective in front of a noun, what you have to keep in mind is do not separate them when it comes to part of speech, right? So if the noun is the object, they are all the object. It just follows the noun that it modifies. So we have the object red door. We have the verb couldn't find, of course not, can't found. Okay, so then, well, let's try to say something like this then. I can say, so I'm first going to place, where's the eraser? Okay. The object and then verb, right? So let's go to inflection route number 2 this time, right? Because, yes, once again, I'm going to start with the display form of the adjective red, but I don't want its display form. This time, I want, instead of the ta ending, I want the attributive adjective ending, and that belongs to inflection route number 2, right? So let's go to inflection route number 2. Okay, so yes, the attributive adjective ending would be the N ending. And right now, once again, you have the H situation. And just like with inflection route number 1, yes, you once again have to divide it into adjectives and verbs. Okay, now, of course, I should have said this when we were in inflection route number 1, but when you have an adjective, outside of a couple of exceptions, there are exceptions, right? However, for the most part, if you have an adjective that has a display form that ends with H, you will apply a 3-step formula. 빨갛다. We have a perfect example once again, in red. Okay, so outside of a couple of exceptions, what are the exceptions? When you have a double 받침, LNH or LH plus 좋다. These are the exceptions, right? There are also adjectives that end with H once ta is removed, but if it falls into this category, you will not apply the formula that I'm about to show you. They are exceptions, they follow their own formula. Also the case in inflection route number 1. Okay, so right now, for the most part, because 빨갛다 is not one of them, I will simply apply a 3-step formula, which is to remove ta, remove the H, and then attach the ending. Okay, so remove ta, remove H, and then attach the ending. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do. So now I have the color red, but in its attributive adjective form. Okay, so yeah, I can do this now. Because I have it in its attributive adjective form, we already know that I used it, I placed it so that it can modify some kind of a noun that will come right behind it. What is that noun? Yes, once again, door, 빨간 문. So red door, 빨간 문, 빨간 문, red door. Okay. So now we know how to say the object. So red door, let's place it, and then let's say can't found. Okay, so we know how to say red door now. 빨간 문. 빨간 문. So red door, now all together the object. And then, yes, let's just place can't, 못. And then 찾다, find. But of course, I don't want its display form. I want the actual form in past tense. Okay, so let's go to inflection route number 1 to go get the actual form past tense ending. Okay, so we already have the formula here. It's just that we're going to change the ending from the present tense ending to the past tense ending because they both belong to inflection route number 1. So yeah, we already have it right here. We already have it all laid out. Okay, so I'm just going to follow the 4-step formula. So 빨갛다, I'm going to remove 다, I'm going to remove the H, and then I'm going to change the vowel into an 에 or 예, but because the vowel that came right before H is not ya, it's something other than ya, I am not going to change it into 예, I'm going to change it into 에. Okay. Of course, outside of a couple of exceptions, right? Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know why I'm doing what I'm doing. Here. Yeah, we don't need this. We need find, right? I'm sorry about that. So, find, 찾다, the display form of find. I'm sorry about the confusion there. Okay, yes. So, remove 다. In this case, now we have a display form that ends with the J consonant once ta is removed. In this case, now we need a 3-step formula, right? I'm sorry about the confusion there. So remove ta, place a or all as the irregular middle section, and then 드디어, finally, you can attach the ending, right? Okay, so that's what I'm going to do. Of course, it's not going to be all, right? It's going to be a. 찾아, and then now you can attach the ending. 찾았어요. 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 Okay, so whatever the topic may be, are we learning numbers? Are we just learning how to build sentences? Are we practicing listening and understanding? Are we practicing reading comprehension? Are we practicing colors? It does not matter. It all eventually boils down to inflection. If you don't know, in other words, conjugation. If you don't know how to inflect, nothing works in Korean. So if you need catching up to do or reviewing to do with inflection, in other words, conjugation, you can go to my TikTok bio and there you will see PDF files that will lay out all the rules that altogether constitute inflection route number 1 and 2. Okay, so now we have the whole 문장. Okay, so now we have the object and now we have the verb. Okay, so 빨간 문, the object, and 못 찾았어요, can't found. So therefore, now we have the whole 문장, and we're using red as an attributive adjective. So once again, because red is a color that can be a noun, but also an adjective, of course it means that it can be a predicative adjective and it can be also an attributive adjective right here. So that's why I can use red in all three ways. So once again, 문 빨간색이에요. The door is the color red. I can use it as a noun, or I can just say the door is red as a predicative adjective and say 문 빨개요. Or I can also use it as an attributive adjective, 빨간, and say 빨간 문 못 찾았어요. Okay, does that make sense? If it does, 계속할까요? Okay. And of course, yes, some of you who have been attending these lives for a long time must be hearing me say this about 9,000 times by now, but yes, just because it's an object, I will not give it an object particle, right? Because placing a subject or object particle for no reason whatsoever, just because it is a subject or object, those are the rules of poetic Korean. And that's why particles is a reason why poetic Korean is so much easier to learn and so much easier to teach, of course. So that's why I always say, whenever you're taking shortcuts, that, well, voice of the devil that always tries to lure you into shortcuts, the bait that is always dangled right in front of your face is called convenience. Convenience always works as the best bait. Okay, but once again, in real Korean, in real spoken Korean, you have to meticulously understand what they do. So you have to, yes, really ask yourself, do I have a specific reason? Am I in one of these 5 situations? If not, I will not use it. If I am, I will use it. And therefore, I have to understand exactly what happens by using one of the 6 particles. Okay. No, it has nothing to do with being formal. Yes. It's literally, well, some of you sparkles know what I'm about to do, right? So if you think it's too cringy, lower the volume or maybe come back in about 20 seconds. So what I mean by poetic Korean is the format of Korean that is taught in universities, apps, well, books, or language schools, because it is the easiest to learn and the easiest to teach. Now, if you do speak poetic Korean, people will understand. However, it sounds like this. Now, I can say, why are stars so pretty? I can just say that in a natural way. Or I can say basically the same thing by saying, what do you have in mind? The endlessly cavernous nest of your consciousness, as the reason why stars harbor such beguiling charm. Now, I basically said the same thing. However, the latter way is intimidatingly poetic. So, if someone asks me that question like that, yes, I will not be thinking about stars. I'm just going to say, well, it's not you. Trust me, I'm not saying this because of you, but I really had to go for like laundry. Yeah, I forgot to do my laundry. I have to go. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's not you though. Okay, but it is you. Okay, so that's what I mean by colors that can be nouns and also adjectives. Okay, so that's why the slogan is, yes, going back to the poetic thing, that's why the slogan is Escape Poetic Korean. Okay, so now, yes, of course, it means that you can do, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have erased that. Sorry, I'll write it again. 빨간 문 못 찾았어요. Okay, so yes, once again, because we are using red, we can use it as a subject complement, which is a noun. We can use it as a predicative adjective, and we can use it as an attributive adjective. Okay, so, well then, what were the colors? Now, that can be used as nouns and adjectives. Well, for example, blue. It means that you can also do the same with blue. You could have said, the door is the color blue if you want to use it as a noun. But if you want to use it as an adjective, a predicative adjective or attributive adjective, yes, you could have said, the door is blue, or blue door can't found. I couldn't find a blue door. Okay, so now, once again, these 5 colors are colors that can be nouns and adjectives. But if you look at page number 3, so you could be asking a question. Now, 빨간색, 빨갛다, 파란색, 파랗다, 노란색, 노랗다, 하얀색, 하얗다, 까만색, 까맣다. What's this version of black doing here? Okay, so now, yes, black, as you can see, has a noun form and has an adjective form. However, yes, there are 2 versions of black as a noun, right? This 검정색 here, yes, this version of black can only be used as a noun. Okay, but doesn't mean that the color black can only be used as a noun, right? I'm just talking about this one specific version. Okay, so when you want to say the door is black, the door is the color black. If you want to use it as a noun, then you can use whichever version you want. 까만색, 검정색. There is no gigantic difference in nuance between the two. None of them are poetic. Usually, if you see synonyms, it's very ominous, right? Because it means that usually at least one of them is a poetic trap, something that makes you sound extremely and intimidatingly poetic. However, that's not always the case. There are sometimes synonyms that, and you can use all of them. Yes, none of them are poetic. So this would be a situation like that. Okay, but if you want to use black as an adjective, go to this 까맣다, this display form of the adjective black, and then inflect it however you want. Do you want its attributive adjective form? Well, then inflect it and give it the attributive adjective ending. If you want the predicative adjective form, well, then go to inflection route number 1 and give it the yo ending or whatever ending you need that fits the context. Okay, so yes, there are more ways of saying red, more ways of saying blue, more ways of saying yellow, more ways of saying black, more ways of saying white. We will get there when we get to page number 4. Well, not exactly 4, but tomorrow, in the next live, we will go to page number 4 and we will be talking about 4 to 8. And yes, there we will start talking about variations. Okay, but these are the most typical basic versions that you should keep in mind because they will be used in most situations because these basic forms, I call them basic forms because they are not necessarily tied to any kind of a specific purpose or nuance. So you can use it in almost all situations. The variations, on the other hand, they have a very, very specific nuance or function. So yes, in the 3rd live of the color course, we will start talking about variations. Okay, so page number 3 shows you a couple of examples then. Yeah, it's exactly what we have talked about. Right now, I just took 파랗다 and I inflected it. I gave it the yo ending so that I can use it as a predicative adjective. Your lips are still blue. 입술, lip, 아직, still, a version of still, 파래요, blue. And yes, I can take red and use it as an attributive adjective. I just took 빨갛다 and inflected it. I gave it the attributive adjective ending, the N ending. So I'm saying, 어제 빨간 신발 신었어요. Did you wear red shoes yesterday? Yesterday, red shoes wore. Okay, so of course, a version of wear, when you are wearing something, putting something on your feet, right? Only your feet. So for example, shoes and socks, for example. Okay, so, and of course, as you can see, all the display forms end with H. So we just took a look into a couple of examples in which we are inflecting display forms of adjectives that end with H. Well, it means that, of course, the inflecting formula will be exactly the same. So if you go to, of course, my TikTok bio, you will see PDF files that lay out all the rules that altogether constitute the rules of inflection route number 1 and 2. So if you need studying into inflection, yes, of course, do that separately. Once again, colors, numbers, whatever the topic is, nothing works without inflection. Okay. Thank you. So, yes, that was the second live of the color course. Okay, so, yes, I could have also said, I'll just show you with blue. Yeah, it could have also been 파란색이에요. It could have also been 파래요, predicative adjective, 파래요. And it could have also been an attributive adjective, 파란 문 못 찾았어요. Okay, so I couldn't find a blue door. Okay, so as you can see, if you have one of the 5 colors, blue, red, yellow, white, and black, yes, you have to be ready to inflect it if you want to use it as an adjective, or you have to be ready to use an ending mark if you want to use it as a noun. Unlike the colors that we looked into yesterday, the colors that can only be nouns. Okay. So, does that make sense? If it does, 넘어갈까요? Should we move on? Okay, and don't worry about looking into more examples because some of you who have the PDF file, yes, must have seen that in page number, yes. So in the later pages, there are, yes, well, sections that were made for practicing, right? Through looking into a lot of examples. So we will get to that part, and when we get there, we will take everything that we've learned into consideration and try to apply it into building a lot of sentences as examples. So we'll get there soon. Now, starting tomorrow, we will start playing with words. Okay, so some of you who have been attending these lives for a long time must have heard me say this a couple of times. It's not a concept that only applies to colors, it actually applies to everything. What do I mean by playing with colors? It means just changing the version of a word to change the nuance without changing the word itself or adding a word. Okay, so for example, let's say I am, let's say, watching a movie, and let's say there's like this typical devil character. You know that typical devil character that, you know, has horns, has those, how should I say it, spiky wings, and or something like that, breathes fire. Okay, so let's say the devil is red, but it's not just red, it's hellish red, so it's scary. So in that case, I can use 시뻘겋다. But as you can see, I just changed the basic form of red into a version of red that indicates, well, the nuance of very vivid, negative, and also scary. Now, did I say anything? Did I say the word scary? Did I say negative? Did I say that it's very vivid? Of course not. I did not change the word, and I didn't add any kind of a word to give you a clue. I didn't say scary red. I could do that if I want to. I can actually take the adjective scary and say, and change it into an, well, let's say, an attributive adjective and use red as a noun, and I can say, well, scary color of red, or scary color red. So in that case, I'm using scary as an attributive adjective to modify the noun red. In that case, I am actually telling you by adding more words. So in that case, it would be very easy for you to know what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say red, but a very scary type of red, like blood. Okay, I know that some people have a hard time looking at blood, right? Okay, so imagine that. the feeling that you get when you see a lot of blood. Okay, so that's why playing with words can be tricky because people will not give you any hints. They will not actually give you scary. If they do give you scary, then it's very easy. You just literally said scary. But in this case, you just have to know the variations, right? So that's why playing with words is very tricky, but also at the same time, it's fun. So because, yes, now you can just simply change the nuance by changing the version of a word that you're using. Okay, so starting tomorrow, in the third live, we will start looking into nuance variations.